Now look at the North Tower as it begins its collapse. This is in slow motion. I just want to ask you if that upper block of floors is in fact remaining intact. This is presented in a paper by Dr. Seffin recently. Came out with the Journal of Engineering Mechanics, I think, and also a paper by Bazant and Zhu in that journal. And they require an intact block as a tamper to knock down the lower floors. These data argue against that model by pointing out that the upper block of floors is in fact seen to be disintegrating in the first few seconds during the collapse. Something else is happening than to knock the towers down rather than just an intact block of 15 floors. Does it start at the tippy top? No. It starts near where the planes went in, and our hypothesis then, which fits this data, as you see, is that explosives were loaded approximately every other floor throughout the towers, and then computer programmed to be detonated using radio signals, beginning at the floors near where the planes went in. So you just simply put that in your computer then, and you start there, and it gives the appearance then, it's a top-down demolition. Will you talk about that top-down? South Tower, these flashes, that's the corner, and this is provided by Gordon Ross, excellent website and research by this mechanical engineer, pointing out these flashes from the South Tower. Now, explain that with any hypothesis other than explosives. I would like to hear about it. Also, Richard was talking on the left, you see these plumes. And a number of these plumes, which we call squibs, these high-velocity plumes of dust and debris emerging from the building, well below the zone of disruption. Is readily explained with these explosives. In fact, we see these in controlled demolitions, both of these things, flashes and squibs. But there are three main groups, I would say, in 9/11 research. Right now, we have the NIST team, and some from CLINA and USGS. We have our own 9/11 investigative team, which I'm glad to say is very productive at writing papers and now submitting these to journals. And then I put in green another group who I just have to call speculating hecklers. But as a scientist, when I see a hypothesis that confronts data and fails, then I put it aside. You can heckle me if you want, and that I don't think you would. Some may. And some do, by the way. I reject the no planes theory. This is the no planes hitting the towers theory. I'm not really sure what hit the Pentagon. I wait to see more data and see those videos released. That's the scientist. I just wait, you see, until we get more data. But the point is, experimental science is a filter. We need to allow it to work that way. And those who are trying to apply this filter, we can work with them. I think there are some. I see it. Facts coming from NIST, which we'll see some more of, that show to me that they are trying to apply then the scientific method. There it goes. Yeah, see, little spheres. Little spheres of water. Why does the water form spheres when we get it into droplets? Surface tension pulls it into spheres. So if we see spheres in the World Trade Center dust, we will already have an indication that this iron was molten, which is beyond the temperature which the WTC fires reached according to NIST, and we agree. But we will see there are lots of these iron spheres. If you add sulfur to the mix, then this molten iron plus sulfur, first of all, it stays liquid longer. It stays liquid down to about 988, depending on the mix, 988 centigrade, which is orange hot, yellow-orange hot, which then allows it to flow at that temperature. Everything fits. We look in the spheres and in thermite at look in the dust and in the thermite residue, and we see spheres that are very similar. On the left, the two pictures on the left show thermite spheres produced from the thermite reaction. And the upper left one is actually from John Carullis, AE911truth.org. And he ran the thermite experiment himself, and then he sent me, he caught the dust produced in the thermite reaction. I looked in it, and sure enough, there are spheres there. And then on the lower right, see that sphere there, sphere here. Lots of spheres in the World Trade Center dust. The question is, do they have the same chemical composition? But we already know that these are spheres, so that means they were liquid at one time. I just think these spheres are quite lovely, actually. If you look at the lower left one, you'll see it's cracked open. We find this in a number of cases. A lot of these spheres seem to be hollow shells. It's quite interesting. And by the way, both in thermite and in the World Trade Center dust, hollow spheres frequently are observed. USGS, here we agree with them, also reports the existence of iron-rich spheres in the dust. This, I hope you can see that. It's directly out of their report. And they label it iron-rich sphere. So I called one of the authors on this report. His name is Greg Meeker, very nice fellow. He kept asking me, why are you asking about these spheres? Who are you? Anyway, I said, well, how do you explain these spheres? Because it implies molten iron. He agreed with that. He said the only explanation we can come up with is that somehow these spheres were produced during the cleanup. This is in the World Trade Center dust. Oh, hold on. Okay, it's a hypothesis. Let's consider it. Okay, in the cleanup, so you cut through the steel, and that will produce spheres with oxyacetylene torch, right? Several days after the disaster. And then you look, and that will produce spheres. But the question is twofold. How do we answer that? Well, we get dust from before the cleanup began. We have some dust samples now from 20 minutes after the collapse of the second tower. That's Frank Gillespie. Isn't that great? 20 minutes. And it still shows an abundance. Well, it's the same as the other samples. An abundance of these iron aluminum rich spheres. Of course, the other thing is the composition. We'll get to that. R.J. Lee report also shows these spheres. They did their report for an insurance company for Deutsche Bank, and they looked at the dust in some detail. They also report spherical iron particles. I'm thinking the insurance companies may be interested in this analysis. In some areas, Scott's taken interest in it. No, a lot of people are, actually.